Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today's episode is a Alan and Kitces Unhinged episode where we reach into the mailbag and answer listener questions. So Michael and I love doing these because it lets us really dig into the issues that listeners are concerned about. So today we got to 5 questions, which started with a discussion around niche marketing and what to do when your niche focus client has a spouse or partner that isn't inside your niche. We then talked about how a growing practice can bring on team members and the different team structures that exist for advisors. We dove into a question on TAMPs and what to look for when evaluating them. We then gave our thoughts on a great question about how to raise fees when a client is potentially overusing your services and you realize that you have underpriced them. And then we wrapped up with a discussion on communicating to clients about being a one-man shop or one-woman shop and how they are protected in the event of your death, disability, retirement, etc. So remember that you can access show notes and any additional resources that we mention on the show at xyplanningnetwork.com/33. But if you want to have your question answered on the show, you can join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP and post your question there in the private Facebook group. Now, this month's shows are brought to you by Wealthbox CRM, a technology partner of the XY Planning Network. Designed for financial advisors, Wealthbox is simple, beautiful, and a collaborative CRM. As their tagline says, Wealthbox is a CRM you'll actually enjoy. You can start a free trial in 30 seconds at wealthbox.com, and also be sure to check out our upcoming episode with the co-founders of Wealthbox CRM, John Rourke and Dan Ferranti. All right, here is our mailbag episode with Michael Kitces and myself. All right, let's kick off the mailbag. I like these episodes, mainly because they're called Unhinged.
So you enjoy any opportunity to be openly unhinged? Is that basically what it
Yeah, because it's so different. You know, I feel like I was telling somebody actually earlier today that I feel like this gives you the opportunity to kind of relax, unbutton a little bit since you're kind of the professional on stage. And for me, it just lets me continue doing what I'm doing.
See what this is the difference. Like you view Unhinged as an opportunity to like relax and go with the flow. I, being like an obsessive planner type dude, find this terrifying and the most stressful version of any shows that we do, because I got to actually like respond live on the spot and like somehow be dynamic. I suppose like, I mean, this is our, this is the whole professional business dynamic that we have, right? Like you're going with it and I'm somehow trying to rein you back. But yeah, this is, to each their own on personality styles. I suppose this is a good illustration of it. The takeaway, certainly for anyone who's listening, this is why businesses and partnerships can work, because you get people who are really, really different. And view something as simple as doing an Unhinged mailbag from completely different perspectives.
And the other takeaway is for any conference organizers out there that want a really fun session, you can bring Michael and I in for Q&A Unhinged. You don't have to give us the questions beforehand. And as my dad used to say, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with BS. And Michael and I are both very, I think, gifted at that ability.
You just called me full of BS.
No, you dazzle them with brilliance most of the time.
We need to move on to some questions here before we get in trouble.
All right. So the first one is a bit of a longer question, and that is probably the last thing your podcasts want to hear, and that's another 10 minutes on niche marketing. You know what? I think our listeners do want to hear more about niche marketing, because if they continue to listen in, they obviously love listening to us talk about niching. I believe in building a firm using a niche market from the consumer's view. Have you ever come across a couple that questioned your niche proposition? For example, being an advisor who markets towards teachers, what about the teacher's spouse who might be a small business owner? Has the question ever come up where the entrepreneurial spouse wonders if you're a good fit because your services are so catered to your niche, which would be their spouse being the teacher, and that it could be perceived that you only have the tools necessary to handle their spouse's needs and not theirs? So to sum this up, basically, if your niche market is teachers and your teacher is married to another profession, do clients care that you say you only market towards teachers and yet you're working with a couple that has different needs? It's not something I've ever come across, actually. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
So two thoughts kind of come to mind to me. So on the one hand, I think the first question just comes back to the planner. Like, are you so focused into the niche of teachers that the reality really is my ideal client is a teacher married to a teacher? Like, that's actually legit. That's a legit niche. It's kind of a niche within a niche, but I mean, that's legitimate. That's a reasonable way to focus. You're going to get in a whole other series of issues that come from everything from combining the timing of when pensions are supposed to start, coordinating between employee benefits if they're in the same school system, if they're in different school systems, comparing and choosing them. So, teachers married to teachers is probably a finer point of that niche. That's fine. Now, if your niche is not solely teachers within, teachers married to teachers, so, I mean, there's certainly the piece that comes to mind to me is if you're getting that kind of question, it just makes me wonder, like, how have you framed these services? What are you talking about? Because if you say, hey, well, we can help you around all the employee benefits decisions you have to make as teachers. Well, okay, I don't know that necessarily alienates a non-teacher. If everything you're marketing just says, all we know is about teachers and all we work with is teachers and we don't want to work with anybody who's not currently an ongoing practicing teacher. Yeah, I guess I can sort of see how you may have narrowed that down. I mean, I'm still sort of struggling with it to say, well, okay, but if you're still valuable to the teacher member of the couple, then you're still valuable to them. So, if the other spouse is that concerned, like, feel free to get your own advisor that works with entrepreneurs like you, and that person and me will collaborate together. I mean, if that's really the dichotomy, I mean, my response would be, I guess my first response to that spouse would be, well, you're basically going to have two options then. You're going to find a generalist who doesn't know about entrepreneurs or teachers, or you're going to find the one human being on the planet who has a dual specialty in teachers and entrepreneurs who are married to each other. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought too, is in this day and age where so few advisors are willing to identify their niche market. I was just on a planner's website. I was actually ripping on them on Twitter because they give longer maternity leave than they give paternal leave, I guess, father leave, paternity leave. Anyway, I was ripping on them, but I was laughing about their marketing as well because they specialize in women, individuals and families, and institutions. And so in this day and age where we have billion-dollar RIAs that literally work with anyone that can breathe, including institutions, it's not an issue right now because ultimately, to your point, it'd be extremely hard to go find somebody that specializes in entrepreneurs. And so you're going to get stuck with a generalist because there's so few that even actually specialize in entrepreneurs, much less, obviously, this person that specializes in teachers married to entrepreneurs. In the future, in, I don't know, 3 decades down the line, when everyone has a really, really specific niche, maybe the business model becomes, collaboration between specializations. So if I specialize in teachers and you specialize in a completely different firm and working with entrepreneurs, that the two of us can collaborate to work with a client couple.
Isn't that basically where we are now in many ways? Like, I don't prepare tax returns. I collaborate with tax specialists. Mm-hmm. I don't do estate planning documents. I collaborate with estate planners. It's just in our subdomain of the financial planning world where we've kind of said, well, if it's not specifically something that an accountant or an attorney does, everything else under the sun is okay for us to be generalists in. And of course, that's kind of a ridiculous line. It's really just a line we draw because that's the way it's been in the past because we sold products in all of those other different areas. So we said we could do all of it. But I think you're right. I mean, we already have collaboration between specialists across domains. And I think you're just going to see that proliferate as more people pick specialized domains. Now, the other thing I have to admit that's coming to mind to me for this couple, for a couple that's together, I'm trying to think of a delicate way to say this, so I'll just kind of say it. I would really wonder for a couple like that, whether their feeling is this the center of gravity of their financial problems is not the teacher, it's the entrepreneur. Mm. And that wouldn't entirely be surprised to me, right? I mean, I can even imagine like literally their family's financial plan. Maybe you've got the stable job with the stable income where you don't need to do a lot of planning and worrying. I'm going out here and doing my entrepreneurial thing with, income that's going to fly up and down and all this other crazy stuff that's going to happen. That is sort of the world of being an entrepreneur. And I have to admit, I would wonder if the reason why that question is coming up is just, not to read too much into, oh God, is this like the downfall of my niche because the spouse is concerned I can't handle the niche? And whether it's really something more specific to this couple that are basically expressing the unspoken piece, which is, our greatest financial concerns aren't actually about the teacher side of the equation for us. It's about the rest. It's about being an entrepreneur and all the stuff that's going on in the business. And a person who says, well, can you handle entrepreneur problems, to me is basically saying, I have entrepreneur problems and need help, and I'm not certain that you can provide and fulfill that service. And if the reality is, really is this couple's primary issues are handling their entrepreneurial endeavors, then my first gut is, I don't think there's anything wrong with your niche or being overly focused. I think you've just found a couple where they probably don't really fit your niche because the teacher problems aren't the primary thing that they're concerned about and looking for help with. And that I would either respond to say, look, maybe I'm just not the right fit here. I mean, yes, I work with teachers and the people that are married to them. And of course, that means we cover a wider range of issues. If you go to someone else, I'm sure you'll find someone that covers everything and doesn't know anything about your spouse's employee benefits, the pension system, how the 403B works with all the old options and the special grandfather rule and whatever else goes on in that school system and serving that teacher niche. And to say, look, you can go find a generalist who can work with you and won't know anything about your spouse, or you can even work with two advisors. I'm just going to work with the teacher and help out in that portion. You can find someone that works with entrepreneurs and we'll work together and even introduce that idea, that concept to them of being able to work collaboratively. But yeah, aside from just the phenomenon of, hey, does having a niche around one person mean you're always exclusionary to spouses? Which I have to admit, I've never seen or seen come up with anyone before, and not that that's impossible, but that just keeps taking me back to, I wonder if there's just another dynamic going on with this couple in particular, and that the reason why the entrepreneur spouse is asking about your ability to help entrepreneurs is because their hot button issue is around the entrepreneur issues. And, and that's well and fine. Then maybe they just need a different advisor who more thoroughly specializes in entrepreneurs and will accommodate the teacher spouse.
Yeah. And I'm not sure who asked this question, but so I don't want to be too harsh here, but I will say that sometimes just in conversations with advisors, I find that whenever we're trying to do something a little bit different, such as talking niche marketing and that sort of thing, we can look for excuses. We can look for reasons it won't work. We're searching for, well, what about this one use case, this one scenario, this one thing that could potentially happen, and how will I handle it? And, I'll definitely say that ultimately, these are the types of things that happen so rarely. They come up so not often that I wouldn't worry about it. And if it starts to become an issue, then it's possible that you, I guess in this instance, that you would have selected I probably shouldn't say the easy niche, but the less complex niche or something. And it's just become an issue. But again, I just don't see this coming up. I don't see it being an issue. And if it does come up, to Michael's point, I think you can just say, hey, ultimately, you're going to go hire a generalist, and I can be your generalist and bring in, a subject matter expert on retirement plans for small business owners if that's what comes up and we get stuck. But I just don't see this being a sticking point.
Yeah, but I guess overall, like at a kind of a high level takeaway. So, number one anecdotal situation does not make a trend or a problem or an issue with your business. So at a minimum, just for anything, like I would want to see the data coming in more on this. Number two, if it starts happening more, my next question is actually, how are you marketing and communicating? I mean, have you unwittingly just communicated something that's so hyper-focused to basically be about teachers married to teachers, even though you didn't say it out loud or mean it? I check back on the messaging and make sure you don't have something there that's just scaring away non-teacher spouses. And conversely, if you really want to focus on teachers married to teachers, go even deeper and own that. Number three from there, then I would be looking at, exploring, hey, well, we can work collaboratively with other advisors. We focus on teachers and believe if they have a strong value proposition, working with the teacher member of the couple. If you want to engage with a entrepreneur specialist as well, I'm happy to work collaboratively with them. And then maybe the distant number four would be like, holy crap, do I just have a niche that's wrong or broken or something like that? But I think you really have to work through those others those other steps first. Like, is it really just an isolated case? Because, there'll always be clients who don't fit for lots of reasons. Move on, get to the next one. Don't obsess over solving every one. You should miss out on some clients. Then is there a problem with your messaging? Then can you work with collaboratively? And only last would I really be looking at changing the niche.
Yeah, all of the caveat being, you still need a niche. These are, sometimes we call things first world problems. I didn't get a client because I had too specific of a niche is a much better problem to have than I can't get clients because I don't have a niche. So,
yeah. Well, right. and just at the most basic level, like I honestly, when I think about where this ultimately progresses, I mean, I can even imagine a world where two spouses with their own jobs that have their own nuances in their own industries and professions may end up with two experts that help in each. Like, not to get too graphic here, but if you want to take the medical profession, there are a number of medical specialties that only specialize in one member of the couple and not the other. And that exists on both sides of the spectrum. And that's just the natural way that specialization evolves. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a problem. That actually just means each member of the couple engages medical professionals that are relevant for their issues at their time of life. And I can certainly envision the same thing proceeding in the niche world as well. So, if your value proposition for the teacher is so awesome for the teacher, even if the reality is, well, you're right, I actually really can't work with you as the entrepreneur at all. I'd encourage you to find a financial advisor as an entrepreneur. But by the way, here's all the awesome stuff I still do for the teacher member of the couple. And I'm still very confident that I can provide value for you in this regard.
If we started to spiral there, which we probably need to rein it back in and move on. But I would say that essentially what that spawns, what you just laid out, is an entirely new layer of financial advising, where we almost have a financial advisor that is our general practitioner that works with the couple and the family, essentially. Yeah. And then we end up with niche specialist advisors that the general practitioner may even be coordinating with, to the point that instead of just having a CPA and a state attorney, you now have an advisor that specializes in teachers, an advisor that specializes in entrepreneurs, and the general practitioner that is managing it all, which would be fun.
Yeah, well, which notably means, as exists in much of the medical world today, and you know what, the primary source of your client referrals as that high quality advisor specialist will be
from the general.
All other advisors.
Yep.
Other advisors who don't have your specialization.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the second question. And this one's going to be a little harder to answer, but I think it'll be a fun discussion. What is the ideal team setup? Right now, I work with another advisor in a team, but we're looking to grow and bring on other advisors. It's causing us to have to rethink our current setup and come up with a more official, streamlined team setup. I was thinking of something like a law practice with partnerships and equity stakes, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. So this is an interesting one because I think that there are a couple of models that we're starting to see pop up, and some work better in small firms, some work better in large firms. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer like there is in legal, where there's this kind of de facto partnership model. You come in as a I'm not even sure, what are they, not a paralegal, but whatever they call kind of a low-level lawyer. You come in as a junior, you kind of move up over time, you become a partner after 5 years. We really don't have that in financial planning, and who knows if it's even the most effective way to do it in legal. But I'll throw out a couple of things I've seen, and then Michael, since you work inside of large firm, that may be interesting, other perspective. And we could probably do an entire episode, maybe we just need to bring her on, is with Angie Herber's Diamond Teams. She has written a white paper about it. So Angie Herber's previously owned Angie Herber's Inc. It is now Kaleido, or Kale-Ido is how I have to spell it in order to get it correct. But Kaleido is a practice management firm out of San Diego. But they work in diamond, and so she promotes diamond teams. So if you listen to, episode number 32 with JD Bruce from Abacus, they run these diamond teams. Jake Keebler, back in episode 7, also runs diamond teams as a small firm. So Jake, I don't think they're managing 100 million. So they're state registered. JD is managing over $1 billion. So they're SEC registered. So you can do this small firm, large firm. And it's essentially a 4-person model with a relationship manager that's basically in charge of lead gen. I mean, they're business development. And so they're at the top. And then the two corners of the diamond are lead advisors. So these are the advisors that have the CFP. They've been working for 3 to 5 years. They're capable of taking the lead on a client relationship. And at the bottom of the diamond is associate advisor. That's essentially your new grad, your new hire coming in to learn the business. And then they end up with a bunch of these diamond teams. I think Abacus has something like 13 of these diamond teams or something absurd. And then you end up with kind of a core group of what they call CSAs, or client service associates, which handle paperwork, billing, reporting. They actually have a whole other team for just trading and reporting probably, but you kind of end up with your admin and operations split out. So that's one way to do it. Again, we could probably bring Angie on to talk through just that model, because it is kind of interesting. And I've seen this work in some other firms, not quite the diamond teams, but where they have kind of core teams. And as they grow, they open up a new team and they pull a few people from different teams. So ultimately, people are kind of always shifting around. I think it encourages the concept of clients of the firm instead of clients of the advisor, if advisors are constantly shifting among teams and specializations. And then the other way that I have seen this in terms of growing, and this is extremely new, and again, we're going to do an episode on this here in the next couple months, is on this new concept known as residency programs. This got started with Cornerstone out of Minneapolis. There's now 4 or 5 residency programs that basically are doing 3-year training programs for advisors. You come in for 3 years, they train you to be an advisor, and at the end of 3 years, they send you off. They don't give you a job. It's very much like the medical profession. The only reason I bring that up is because some of the firms that have started to implement the residency programs have noted that the problem is they're bringing on paraplanners that are rock stars. They end up growing into junior advisors and then lead advisors so fast they can't backfill paraplanners fast enough. And so they're essentially bringing in people that are going to be a lead planner, pushing them through the paraplanner and junior advisor stage, and then sending them off before they become a lead advisor. It is a way to get amazing talent, 3 years of amazing work out of somebody, but then not have to give them a lead planner job at the end of it. It's another model that's out there. So I'm rambling a little bit, but those are kind of 2 pieces I've seen. Michael, any thoughts on kind of ideal team setups in this sort of instance?
So I actually want to take a little bit of a step back first to just the original question, which to me, maybe I'm even going to have you read it once more. It seemed to migrate at some point from sort of back and forth between what I would call teams, which is about how are you going to work with and service clients, to team that was used more in the context of basically, I want to add partners to my firm. I want to add advisors to my firm who may or may not be partners. That's kind of a discussion unto itself. But we seem to work back and forth there between. So at the end of the day, are you trying to figure out how to add partners into the business who are all helping to grow the business and who may or may not be advisors? Or are you trying to figure out how to service clients that may include adding advisors?
I think you make a fair point. I think the focus here is on the team setup. And I think what's happening is in our industry, we assume that everyone that comes on board needs to be a partner one day. So I think the term here with partnership and equity stake is more about, hey, do I have to give my new advisor this in order to get them on the team, and what's going to be the structure there? So I would say let's focus on ideal team setup. So if you're sitting here with, you have a firm with 2 advisors and you're looking to grow, how are you going to serve clients? You can't put 3 advisors in a room with a client. I'd argue, especially if you're working with younger clients on monthly retainers, you probably can't even put 2 advisors in a room with a client just because of the sheer time cost involved. So how are you going to grow, from 2 advisors? Maybe you're working with clients together. Maybe you have your own clients and now you're looking to bring on a 3rd advisor. And typically, the buzzwords in financial planning have been silo and ensemble. Silo being, so Michael and I own an RIA together. I have my 50 clients. Michael has his 50 clients. We bring on a 3rd advisor. We start sending them clients. They get their 50 clients and we kind of share operational costs. But I have my clients and my way of operating. Michael has his way. And now we hire you as our 3rd advisor and you have your own way. That's the silo model. And then we have the ensemble model of more of, hey, we have streamlined processes and operations. We all operate the same way. Michael's lead on 25 clients and I'm second chair on 25 clients, and I'm lead on 25 and Michael's second chair. And then we bring on a 3rd and we kind of mix it up so that we have different advisor teams working with different clients under kind of a similar service model. Right, wrong, or otherwise, I think those are kind of the 2 primary overarching umbrellas that we put firms in. I don't know that there's an ideal way to do it. I think some of it comes down to, what type of clients are you working with? Higher net worth, higher fee clients command bigger teams. They command more specializations in certain areas potentially. But I'm not sure there's an ideal way. I think some of it just comes down to what's going to work for your firm, which I know is kind of a cop-out answer, but there's just so many ways to do it.
Yeah, well, I'd almost disagree a little bit. I mean, the path of how you build out a team is getting more and more established within the industry and really isn't that hard. Like overgeneralizing a little or maybe a lot, you're going to bring someone in for the first 1 to 3 years. They're going to shadow a senior advisor so they learn what the heck is going on, and they're going to do grinding work. They're going to crunch plans and analyze scenarios and write things up and just do some of the grinding work that has to get done to support that senior advisor. Then after some period of time, depending on how quickly and well they develop, usually it's probably 2 or 3 years, they're going to start interacting with clients directly, probably still on a limited basis. But at some point, hey, if you got a straightforward question, you don't call me, you call my associate planner instead, and they're going to take the question for you directly and handle it. And if it's a serious issue, they'll escalate it up to me. Then after about 2 to 3 years more of that, now you're probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years into your career there, you're going to start taking your own clients. It's likely going to be the smaller clients first. It may be clients that got rotated down to you. It may be a couple of clients you're going out to get on your own, but you're going to start taking responsibility for some level of clients. Gain some experience with that, learn some skills, find out what works and doesn't. There's both some things that can be trained and some that you're going to learn from the School of Hard Knocks. And then as you start taking clients, eventually you're going to add more, whether they are shifted to you or you go get them, whatever the firm's marketing and growth process looks like, until eventually there's enough of a client base that you are the primary relationship manager for a group of clients. And then you're probably anywhere from 5 to 10 years in your career by there. And you're now going to take in the next junior advisor who's going to do the same thing for you, and the cycle continues. The piece that still sticks for me from sort of that discussion at the beginning, and part of why I raised the question though, is I'm still concerned for this person, and I think for a lot of folks out there, that there's some confusion about whether that person you just made an advisor is a partner, has to be a partner, is going to be a partner, needs to be on a track to partner, or all of that. That I still think there's some confusion here between ownership and partner paths versus just a team to service clients. These are separate things. These are
Agreed.
Separate phenomena. Now, certainly, anybody who services a large base of clients, you may ultimately decide has such a vested interest in the business that it's mutually rewarding for everyone for that person to have an equity stake. Certainly anybody who helps grow the business, like actually bring in clients, business develop, make rain, things along those lines, the firm is certainly incentivized to figure out how to make them a partner, because if someone's really good at growing a client base and doesn't feel like they have an equity stake, they are likely to go and create their own, i.e. leave and break out and start their own practice. So eventually, as a firm owner, you really want to find a path to equity for people that are helping to grow the business. But the reality that we see already, and frankly, an area that's really been exploding in the industry benchmarking studies and trends in recent years, is this whole phenomenon that there are many advisors who have a very senior position within a high quality team of advisors that serve a great group of clients, and they're not a partner, and they're never going to be a partner. They are an employee advisor who gets paid very well for a job very well done, and does not participate in the benefits of equity ownership, and does not have to deal with all the crap that goes with being ownership. An equity owner. And it's not just the fun financial rewards, it's the responsibility and the decision making, and the buck stops on your desk, and all the problems flow up to you, and all the other things that go with actually being an equity owner in a business. There's a lot of bad stuff that goes with it too. I almost feel like, as with our recent surprisingly popular episode on failure, I feel like we could, Alan, we could probably just do a show on the downsides of being a business owner and
why you want to be an employee sometimes.
Yeah, why you really want to be an employee sometimes, and recognizing that distinction. But that to me is the other piece of this. Building team is frankly not that hard. You bring a junior person, you expose them to the business, you get them involved, and as their experience grows, as long as the business is growing, you're eventually going to add more and more responsibility and clients to them until eventually they become a planner. And obviously a lot that goes with that, but the path to that is relatively straightforward. The blocking points I find for most firms are either A, they think it's got to be a path to partnership when it doesn't, and they actually get hung up on that. B, they get a great person who should have a path to partnership and they don't give them one, and they screw it up in the other direction. So, really, you got to recognize at some point, is this person adding value and growth to the business or not? And C, is the firm itself growing. I find the biggest blocking points that tend to happen in firms are around growth. If a firm is not growing, there's really no way to grow out a team, because growing a team requires developing people and moving them up the line. And if you're not growing the firm, you've got nowhere to move them. There's nowhere to move up to, because you're just going to pay them as the owner. You're going to pay them more and take less and put less in your own pocket. And no owner wants to do that. And that's why so many career tracks and advisory firms end up having these rather low ceilings, because the firm isn't growing. The opportunity set at the firm isn't growing. Conversely, when a firm is growing, frankly, a lot of these challenges work themselves out surprisingly straightforward, because if the firm is really growing, you know what? They need more planners, more people at a senior level, more people at a junior level. Any firm that's really steadily growing is constantly on the search for new and good people. And so if you're good people in the firm and growing and developing and improving yourself, it's virtually inevitable you're going to move up the line at some point, because the firm needs to fill the slots, and it's going to be a lot easier to move you up than it is to go find a person from scratch anyways. So for better or worse, like I find a lot of these challenges start at the growth level and whether you're having growth. And the bottleneck, if you're the business owner, which I think was actually the context of this person here. So recognize on the one hand, it's going to be hard to expand your team if you're not growing. And the challenge sometimes that we have to go through as business owners is, if you really want to grow, you're going to have to take the leap of faith of hiring this person and recognizing that it will give you the capacity to continue to grow the business, but that you've got to get there as the business owner first and being ready to make that investment.
So 2 more thoughts on this. One is circling back to your comment about we just assume partnership is an inevitability. I think that comes out of the legal and medical professions, where historically everyone became a partner. In a law practice, you either moved up to partner or you got booted. You didn't just stop moving up the career path. Same with the medical profession. For a very long time, you move up to a point where you essentially get a sweetheart buy-in deal. You become an owner of a medical practice. Now that is slowly changing as we're moving to a more employee model in the medical profession. But regardless, I think that's what we've seen. And so we assume that the career path leads to lead advisor and then to partner. And I do agree that that is not correct. I don't think that that's a necessity. Some people need to be partners. Some people can contribute on that side of things. Others are just fantastic lead advisors and need to stay lead advisors.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge in the industry, just realizing that, accepting that, acknowledging that. I think for some people, frankly, it's a letdown, because the truth is they contribute as an employee, and maybe a wonderful one, but they contribute as an employee, and they were hoping that would mean they're someday going to be a partner. And realistically, you probably shouldn't. You're probably not going to, and you probably shouldn't be. You should be well paid for a job well done. And there are certainly a number of advisory firms that just sadly also underpay their employees and create that dilemma where now suddenly we feel like we should get partnership and we should be entitled to partnership because it's supposed to be the makeup for the fact that we've been getting stiffed on compensation for years. So that's a whole other unhealthy dynamic. Yep. If you're just grossly underpaid with no path to higher pay, that's a separate issue. But the path to higher pay is higher pay. It's
Agreed.
Not partnership. The path to partnership is about whether you want to take on the responsibilities and challenges
and risk
and opportunity and benefit that goes with being an equity owner. That's everything from, hey, when the firm does well, things are great. And when there's a bear market, I might have to pony up money out of my pocket to pay everybody else's salary after I don't get any myself.
All right. So, I think, again, that this question could go a couple of different ways, but hopefully this helps answer the question. For anybody, whether it's the person that asked this question or any other questions, definitely just know that all of these questions come from our VIP community. So if you go to XYPlanningnetwork.com/VIP, you can sign up for our private Facebook group. And once a month, we call out 4 questions like this and have great discussion. So this is a question that some folks actually weighed in on before Michael and I got to it. So definitely, if you have questions for us that you want us to cover in the mailbag or just want to interact with the community, it's a great place to go. It's XYPlanningnetwork.com/VIP. All right. So another question. This one should be fun as well. I'd love to hear about the pros and cons of using a TAMP, and even specific TAMPs that Alan and Michael know about. I'd also like to hear any thoughts on the available investment options available at the various TAMPs. Now, before we kick this off, I will say we did an entire episode specifically on managing money back in see, episode 24. So XYPlanNetwork.com/24. So you can hear Michael and I talk specifically around investments. And there was a TAMP section in that. But we can briefly kind of recap some of the things that we talked about there with TAMPs that we're aware of and kind of the general type that exist, as well as general investment philosophies of maybe a few just to help point you in the right direction. So, Michael, do you want to kick this one off?
Oh man, I may even try to figure out where to where to start. It's a wide topic, which I'm sure is why this person has struggled is maybe a little bit as well. So I guess let's just start at the very high level.
Well, let's define TAMP.
Yeah, so TAMP, for those of you who aren't familiar, turnkey asset management platform. Turnkey asset management.
We love our acronyms.
We do love our acronyms in the industry. So the idea of TAMP is, instead of internally being responsible for doing all these various investment management tasks and things that have to get done in a firm in order to execute it, you outsource it. You outsource it to a turnkey asset management platform. So instead of saying, I'm going to build my own models and get the rebalancing software and manage it and monitor it and execute the trades and do the transactions and make sure people are on track and all of those dynamics of actually being a hands-on investment manager, you are outsourcing this to a third-party platform that does this for you or does as much as possible for you and makes it very turnkey and easy to use. So at some level, although this is probably a little bit of an oversimplification, it's almost as though, imagine instead of just buying a mutual fund that has a manager that does stuff, you have direct access to the underlying mutual fund platform, so your clients own the account directly, not pooled with everybody else like a fund. Your clients get the account managed directly by an investment manager with all still the back-end stuff that makes that happen on their behalf. And you're simply the liaison that goes in between the asset management platform that's handling the client's money and the client themselves.
So, the first part of this question is, what are the pros and cons of using a TAMP? And I think our previous episode will help kind of lay that out, because in that episode, Michael and I are both very pro outsourcing investment management, especially for those that are focused on financial planning, because it is such a distraction, especially as you're getting started and you're a smaller firm, you don't have an investment team. It's really nice to be able to get access to some really sweet technology that you can't afford on your own that just have really high minimums. I mean, some of the more popular performance reporters don't make sense until you have 50 million AUM. So if you have 10, it's nice to get pooled with thousands of other people using the TAMP. So you get access to really sweet deals on trading cost, on investment management teams, reporting, just stuff you can't do internally. So I think unless you are just really investment focused, in which case you probably wouldn't be asking the question about TAMPs, I say pro TAMP for the most part. And then when we talk specific TAMPs that you can use, I think this is kind of where we tried to break it down in that episode of like fully technology driven TAMP. And these are like your strict Betterment institutionals, just total robo, almost that you literally, all you do is hit the account open button and transfer the money in, and that's it. Yeah. They do everything else. You don't touch it. You don't have control over anything. And then we have, some of the, I would say, more traditional TAMPs that are still leveraging technology, but maybe you have more control. They're using, DFA mutual funds or something like that allow you to hold cash, do some tax loss harvesting or whatever it is that, gives you a little bit more control. You can have more money in alternative investments if that's your thing. So there really aren't that many TAMPs. Maybe a blog post one of these days could be actually kind of going out and gathering just like a list of names of TAMPs. I mean, if I was sending people to some, and I'm going to leave some folks out, Watermark is one that's out there that got started with McLean Asset Management out of Virginia. And they are kind of more of your traditional style DFA mutual fund TAMP type. You've got Betterment Institutional, that's your like fully automated robo. You've got Motif Advisor, which is kind of an interesting one that plays into this available, the investment options. So if we look at Watermark, DFA funds, you need to believe in the DFA model. You need to drink the Kool-Aid. I personally am a Kool-Aid drinker. Michael, I don't think you're quite so much a one. And so, you've got to believe in that investment philosophy. Betterment Institutional is Vanguard ETFs. That is all they've got. And so you better believe in passive investment management. Motif opens up the door for a little bit more active management, a little bit more investment in specific areas such as, maybe I should define a motif as basically a holding of 30 stocks or ETFs. And so you could literally have a motif that you trade in wearable technology because your clients are really passionate about wearable technology. I would say it's more It opens up the door to more active management than some, not quite as turnkey as Better Institutional, not quite as, I don't know what the word is, as Watermark. But so that's another option out there. Loring Ward has a TAMP.
Well, let's see. Well, the
SCI.
Yeah. Well, the biggest TAMPs out there are, and some of these work with RAs and some of these are more in the broker dealer channels. InvestNet is probably the biggest. They're sort of a mega platform that brings together a hugely wide range of outside managers that can fill in. So it's not even just their asset managers. They themselves are kind of a middleman to bring in lots of different asset managers. InvestNet is huge. SCI is huge. AssetMark is a very big player in this space. Placemark is a large player in this space. Loring Ward, Alan had mentioned. Lockwood is out there. There's a pretty good number of TAMP providers and platforms out there. But again, and some will use mutual funds and some will use ETFs and some you're actually plugging into a separate account manager, some other third party, i.e. through InvestNet, as opposed to some of the platforms that are just going to manage your money directly themselves. So there's at least one fewer layer of the layers that stack on top. But again, at the most basic level, I mean, the decision for you about TAMP or not is this. Do you want to build the models? Be responsible for the models, pick the investments. Are you going to use this ETF or that mutual fund? Monitor them all on an ongoing basis. If you're not doing ongoing research and due diligence on your investment holdings, particularly as an RIA, you're running a very significant danger of fiduciary breach for failing to do your due diligence. Do you want to actually be responsible for executing the trades and managing the rebalancing and having the software to track the rebalancing and do the trades? Do you want to be that hands-on to investing or not? Now, 15, 20 years ago, there was really no choice. If you were going to do an AUM business, you had to. And when you look at most large advisory firms today, they've all built out their own internal teams to do this because they had to build that way 15 or 20 years ago. And they didn't really want to fire their staff and outsource it after they were halfway through building the business. But when you look at, well, first of all, just the past 10 to 15 years, TAMPs went from being virtually non-existent to being absolutely enormous. And I think the reason you saw them go through that is for most folks building a firm today, it's really unappealing to do all the staff hiring and management to do that stuff unless truly, really, your secret sauce value proposition for your clients is that you pick better investments than everybody else. And if that's really you, then you're going to want to be completely hands-on and you're going to go with a custodial platform where you can pick your own investments and manage your own investments and get the software to help handle it and execute it that way. But as the whole profession increasingly, the financial planning profession increasingly goes, actual financial planning is their primary value proposition. I think you're going to increasingly see this world where we say, why would you do this internally? Like, I don't do the tax returns internally. I don't draft the trusts internally. I don't sell the life insurance internally. And I don't need to build the investment models from scratch internally either. I need to make sure my clients find implementation solutions in all those areas, get a good accountant, get a good attorney, get the appropriate life insurance, and get appropriate investments. And you may play a matchmaker role in that, which includes plugging them into a TAMP. But that's the fundamental distinction. Are you doing it yourself? Or are you plugging them into a third-party solution to bring them the implementation and being a part of that process, but not actually the one that drives it and is solely responsible for it?
Yeah, and there really are a lot of different options when it comes to TAMPs. I mean, I know I said earlier, there's not that many. I mean, you don't want to interview every single one of them. You do need to narrow it down by, investment philosophy is huge. You got to have somebody that, if you're a DFA believer, don't get an active management, TAMP. So, yeah. And honestly, if you're a huge fan of DFA, call your DFA rep and they'll tell you the TAMPs that use DFA funds. If you're a huge fan of Vanguard, you can find the folks that do that. If you're a big fan of a certain company's active management style, great. If you're big into, I don't know, you could call Pinnacle Advisor Solutions to,
if you want tactical asset allocation.
Yeah, if you want tactical. Yep. And so it's kind of, you almost narrow it down first by investment options or in kind of investment management philosophy. And then you start looking at what are the services they provide, what are their fee structures and all that sort of thing.
And that actually is a good point, just to reiterate once more there, that the first driving factor when you're going out to pick a TAMP is deciding what your investment philosophy is. I mean, just stylistically, are you asked for passive? Do you believe in value of buying individual securities, or do you prefer mutual funds and ETFs, et cetera? What are your guiding investment principles? Not that you're going to do yourself, that you want to see someone else to do, but what are those guiding investment philosophies and principles for you. Find a manager who aligns with that, or several managers who align with that. And then you can drill down to the details of what do they do and how do they do it, and what's their technology and what's their support and what's their costs and all the other details that you have to go with for due diligence. But it starts at what's their investment philosophy in the first place, and are you comfortable with that? Because if you're not comfortable with that, the rest of it isn't really going to matter.
All right, so we have two more questions I want to get to before we have to wrap up today. So the next question is, how would you recommend addressing fee changes inside of a monthly subscription service model? For example, if at some point in time you realize the original monthly fee isn't covering the work being done, any tips on delicately handling this situation? And I'll say this is a discussion that we had when we launched XYPN was, hey, we're charging a monthly fee. What happens if we need to raise it? What happens if that fee needs to change? We now have 200 firms almost that we would have to change that fee for across the board. Or, what happens if we have a few folks that need additional services and we need to raise their fee? So this one is interesting. I think that raising fees is tough. I won't lie. I definitely think that it's something that is a challenging scenario to go in. And, if you refer back to the episode actually that we did just before we did the one on AUM, where we talked specifically on monthly retainers, back episode 23, we touched on this a little bit. And that is, one, how are you designing your fee structure in general? So if you're putting everyone at $150 a month and you don't have a really focused niche and a really focused service model, you're going to have some people that are overusing your services. And so sometimes you end up with these outlier individuals that really almost abuse the service, whether they're doing intentionally or not. They are overusing the service because they don't fit within your kind of model, your niche market and your ideal service model for the clients. The other piece is, if you sense and you're seeing that this is happening a lot where clients, I guess that your service is mispriced, how are you calculating fees? So we've had folks on, Jake Keebler, we had Andrew Severston, we had Jude Boudreau that have been on this show talking about more of a net worth income-based model, which I think is very interesting. So it's more of a calculation based on net worth and income. Let's see, we had JD with Abacus on talking how they charge monthly fee plus AUM, and that monthly fee changes based on complexity. So there's some ways to do it. But ultimately, if you have someone at $150 a month and you need to raise them to $200, any thoughts, Michael, on how to delicately handle that situation?
So there are a few things that come to mind. The first is, as you're getting started with the business, on the one hand, you can manage expectations up front, which is, our current fees are $150 a month or whatever the number is. We may raise this down the road at some point, and certainly when we do, we'll have a discussion about it. But you can at least just kind of put it out there. This could raise at some point down the road. If you don't necessarily want to introduce that conversation up front, at a bare minimum, whatever you do, if there's one thing you take away from this, do not fall prey to this temptation when you're trying to get your first clients of blurting out things like, I promise you'll have this fee forever and I'll never raise it.
And it does come out. You get nervous.
People
you want that sell.
Yes, you want it. Don't go there. First of all, it does not make that much difference anyways. At the end of the day, they're going to say yes or no to you because they like you and trust you and are comfortable with your services and believe in it. It's not because you promised them that in 2029 your fee would still be the same as it is today. No one's that good at thinking far in advance to actually figure that out, what a deal that would be. So don't go there. What ends up happening is if you blurt it out, it didn't actually matter to get the sale, to get the person to sign up, but it will blow up the relationship later when you find that you need to raise the fee, because now you're actually going to be more likely to drive them away. So ideally set expectations that fees may incrementally rise over time. And whatever you do, don't set the expectation that they're going to be flat forever. Now, other pieces from there. The next easiest way to manage fee increases is to do them gradually. Don't paint yourself into a corner where you've never done a fee increase for so long that by the time you have to deal one, you have to smack everyone with a 40% fee increase, which freaks the hell out of almost anybody. Ideally, you do that gradually. You might even come back to clients annually and just say, you know what, just due to general increases in costs across the industry, we are raising our fees slightly this year. We're going from $150 a month to $155 a month, or maybe $160 a month, which is a couple % increase. Most people will not think twice about it. If you got the power within your agreements to raise them automatically with a negative consent, which I believe is now permissible for most states. If you can simply send them a notice that says, hey, we've updated our fees. They're $160 a month going forward. We've adjusted your payments accordingly. Let us know if you have any concerns. Frankly, that's even more ideal so that you don't have to push as deeply into that conversation. But the more that the smaller you make the fee increases, the less painful it is and the less likely clients are to balk. And it's much, much easier to raise clients' fees by $5 to $10 a month each year, year after year, than it is to wait 3 to 5 years and then have to come back to do a $30 to $50 increase all at once. So if you can do it incrementally and smaller, that's better, which means even if you don't need to raise fees, if you don't need to raise fees, can you raise them slightly anyways, just to create the expectation, the framework for clients that these are not stable for life, that they go up, but that hopefully they go up by such a small incremental amount that as long as they're getting wealthier and succeeding in their financial goals and are on a good track because you're helping them, they're not going to blink twice at the fact that you cost an extra couple bucks a month over where they were in the past.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that issues like this generally, it means you may not have done something correct on the front end. You may not have priced it correctly. You may not have set expectations correctly. There's probably a lot of things that went wrong. And then you get to a point where you're like, crap, now how do I have this conversation? So if you've painted yourself into a corner and you've got a client that's just totally abusing, the service model, you're in a really bad spot. I would say try to match the fee increase with service model changes. What more are you doing for them? If you were a solo and now you have a paraplanner, now you have an investment management team, you're growing, you've started doing tax returns or something, can you somehow match it with an added service layer in order to address it? Or maybe you need to have a conversation with a client to say, look, you're falling outside the scope of our service model, that ultimately this is what we offer and this is how much we're charging you. If you want these added services, we're going to need to raise your fees, or you can quit utilizing these added services essentially, and let them decide. Do they want to kind of scale back what they're asking of their financial advisor, or do they want to pay more for additional services? I think that's an appropriate approach to kind of create a second tier and let your client opt in or opt out. I'm not going to lie, it is a tough conversation to have. It is harder. We know that having a conversation around fees is much harder than it used to be around commissions, and as we have this march towards from commission to AUM to monthly retainers, it's a lot harder to have these discussions than in the past. But I can say from watching advisors do this, one of the best I know in the business at doing this is actually Jake Keebler, who I referenced earlier, who, he's told me he'll just raise fees by several $1,000s on a client. And it's kind of one of those like, hey, it's just the way it's got to be because, these are services you're using and they generally stay. And I think some of that just has to do with sheer confidence in your service model and knowing that what you're doing is worth way more than what you're charging for it. And just being able to say, hey, look, this is the deal. If you want to keep working with us, this is what it's going to cost you. If you don't want to pay that, fine, go find somebody else.
Yeah, I think to me, you're kind of raising indirectly an important distinction here between, do you feel like you need to raise fees because overall the depth and the volume of services you're providing your clients is just beyond what you're charging them and just there's a mismatch there? Or are you finding you need to raise fees on a particular client who's a problem client that's utilizing so heavily? Because I have to raise it. Your alternative for, I've got a problem client that I need to raise fees on. Well, first of all, Alan just kind of framed up one way that you can come back to them and kind of say, look, for the depth of services that you're using, we have a different fee structure and here's what it is. And you can take it if you want. And if not, that's okay too. And kind of invite them to leave. But the second option, if you just got someone that's severely abusing your services, I'm going to introduce a new term you may not be familiar with. You need to fire your client. I know that sounds a little harsh, but from the business owner perspective, if you have someone that is just drastically utilizing your services outside the scope and can't seem to be reined in on that scope, you may need to sit down with them and have the hard conversation that says, you know what, I'm just not sure I am the right fit for you and what your needs are, and put that out there. And you know what the worst case scenario is? They won't react well and they'll fire you.
Worst case scenario.
And you instantly get more profitable the moment that happens because they're not absorbing more time. Now, I actually don't take the prospect of firing clients lightly.
Not at all.
The truth again to this, and not to keep keeping the blame back on the person that wrote in an innocent question, but I find most often the scenarios I hear where advisors are struggling with clients that abuse and overutilize their services, it's because the advisor never said anything forth about an expectation of what the reasonable scope was. So either A, the client just has no idea they ask questions, you respond. It's like, okay, I guess that's how it works. Like, don't presume the client understands the scope of your services and what expectations are realistic, particularly if you're working with maybe younger clients who haven't even interacted with other advisors before and have no context for this. You need to explain to them what reasonable expectations are. So this is why I advocate for things like having a client service calendar. We'll make sure we get that mentioned in the show notes. Something that lays out service expectations for clients, not only to commit to what you will do, but also to set the expectations about what's too much and what's not reasonable for the client to ask. Now, sometimes, particularly as newer advisors, we actually dig this hole even deeper. Not only do we not narrow the scope, but because we're so anxious to get those initial clients, we overservice them, set the expectation of that service level, and then we can't get back out of it later.
Yeah, so I have one good example of that, of an advisor that decided to email every single one of their clients monthly with a reminder of what they were supposed to be working on that month, which was really great when they had 10 clients. And when they had 20, they realized it was a mistake. And at 30, they were buried because they couldn't hand that task off to anybody else. And now the clients have an expectation. They're literally getting an email once a month from their advisor. So just a quick anecdotal example of, if you overserve, you need to be prepared to continue to overserve. And we are lightheartedly using the term fire clients. I have railed against it in the past simply because firing a client means there was a failure in bringing that client on in the first place. So I would say if you get to a position, and I know we're kind of on a tangent with this question, but if you get to a position where you're having to fire a client, I would be very, very intentional about reviewing your process for bringing on clients and evaluating clients that are going to come onto the firm, because ultimately I believe having to fire a client is a failure in the sales process.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm inclined to agree about that conclusion that virtually all these scenarios come from some failure in the process early on. Either you didn't set the expectations, or you didn't really screen the client and what you were getting into in the first place, and so now suddenly you find yourself in this situation because you didn't screen out or set realistic expectations, and now you're trying to recover from it. But again, just the point to it, if the situation is that foregone, then yeah, maybe the reality is you need to have a hard but polite conversation with the client that says, I'm just not sure we're the right fit, and I'm not sure I can fulfill your needs and what you're looking for here. But in terms of that broad-based question about the practice overall, how do you raise fees? I think ideally it's you do it slow and gradually, and you try to create an expectation that fee increases are just a normal thing. And when they happen in small increments, virtually no one's going to get upset or freak out about it. And the more that they've gotten used to a few, the less of a big deal that they are. And, God bless the power of compounding. Small fee increases over time still can help move up the revenue of the business to keep up with rising costs and staff and all the rest without being a shock to clients.
Yeah, and I'll add one more point to that, because we have done this in XYPN, and that is that we'll find a subset of our advisors are looking for a very specific service that not all of our members are looking for, not all of our members are interested in paying for, but maybe a small subset are really, really interested in bookkeeping services or additional marketing coaching or something like that. You can always add in an a la carte service model. You can always add in an extra service model. So if you're looking and 10% of your clients are just begging you to do their taxes, or they're asking for concierge style bill pay services or something. There's something kind of a common thread among some of your clients. It's okay to come back in and say, hey, we normally charge $150 a month, but for $200 a month, you now get access to this additional service that we know some of our clients want, but not all of our clients, to the point that we're going to raise fees on everybody. All right, so we're going to run over our typical hour as usual, because I do want to get to this last question. This one, when I was reading down through here, I can't not answer this one. For those who have a lifestyle firm with no intent of ever adding partners or significant full-time staff, well, how do you respond to client concerns about working with a one-man shop? I love this, because I think this all comes down to sales, and sales is my thing. That's what I love doing. I was a one-man shop. I never had any staff outside of part-time virtual paraplanners and assistants and somebody to answer my phones. I used an army of independents, but never actually had any full-time staff. And this comes up. It really does. An advisor or clients will ask the advisor, hey, what happens if you get hit by the proverbial short bus? What happens if
or a long bus?
It could be the long bus. It's usually the short bus that comes along. What happens? And so for me, I used to be very preemptive with this. And so like all things that people told me was negative, like being 25 years old or being a solo or being fee only or anything else, I always just kind of came in hard with it on, this is why you want to hire me. You want to hire me because I am a one-man shop. Because when you call, I answer the phone. When you email, I respond. But what happens if something happens to me? And the answer is you better have a backup plan. And so I accomplished this in two ways. On the investment management side, I accomplished this by hiring a TAMP. So just like we're talking about outsourcing investments, from day one, I outsourced my investments to a company that if something had happened to me, they were actually capable of taking on the clients immediately and would have serviced those clients or transitioned them to another advisor.
And the key message that for clients is if something happens to me, like, your money's okay. Your money is being watched. Yep. Your money is being cared for. So like, yes, obviously I won't be here to give you the advice anymore, but your dollars aren't like sitting in limbo and twisting in the wind if something happens to me.
Absolutely. So it's not like all the money is in Alan Moore's account and I'm managing it. I mean, it's always going to be at a custodian anyway, but in this instance, the same investment managers could continue to manage it. And I think honestly, that's the bigger concern for clients is what's going to happen with my money. And I think TAMP is an easy way of fixing that, to be able to say, hey, look, it's here. Now, if you want to self-manage investments and you have all of your investment accounts at TD Ameritrade, I think it's very easy to craft a templated email that someone, and we'll talk about who could do this, but someone could send your clients if something were to happen to you, whether it be a death or a disability, to be able to say, hey, this is who you contact at TD Ameritrade or Shareholder Service Group or wherever in order to get access to your accounts. It's all over their account statements. It's not like they're going to have a tough time finding them. So I think that's the big concern. Usually from my experience, if they're asking, hey, I'm only going to be working with a one-man shop, I guess there's actually two other big concerns that I hear. One is, what happens if you don't know the answer? What happens if you're sitting here, working with clients, but you don't know the answer? And I used to pitch very, very hard my network of advisors. And so you can do this through XY Planning Network, through some other of the trade associations like NAFA and FPA, to be able to say, look, I'm not an expert in all things. My goal is to be able to answer 90% of your questions, maybe 95% of your questions. But ultimately, there's always going to be this subset that I need experts on. And I have a team of experts, whether it be accountants, estate attorneys, other financial advisors with specializations in stock options and investing, different things like that I can say, hey, I can call on those people whenever we need them. So kind of promote the fact that I was surrounded by people, even though I was the only one that actually worked at my firm. And then finally, it's who's actually going to manage the client relationship if I were to pass away, which I found clients weren't all that concerned about, to be honest, because I think if they could find me, they could go find another financial advisor. And I relied on my study group for this to be able to say, hey, if something happened to any one of the four of us, the other three would be able to contact clients. They would kind of divvy them up based on personality, who's going to be a good fit, and be able to service them. So that was my sales pitch, right, wrong, or otherwise. And I used to come in pretty hard with that on the front end on, hey, this is why you want to work with a solo shop like me. This is how you're protected by doing that, and all the downsides of working with the big companies, of course, because that was sales. Any added thoughts to that, Michael?
Yeah, so it's worth noting here that this whole phenomenon of what happens to your clients if something happens to you, this isn't even just a competitive issue on getting clients at this point. This is actually becoming a regulatory issue. So
very true.
NASA, that's not the ones that go to the moon. That's the National Association the North American Securities Administrators Association, NASAA. NASA has put forth a model rule that's going to be rolling out to states in the coming year that says state registered investment advisors need to have if not a full succession plan, at least a continuity plan for what happens to their clients if something happens to them. So regulators are expecting you to have a good answer to this, even if you don't necessarily have one yet for your clients. Now, the answer to that can be all the things that Alan had just suggested. Continuity of investment management, frankly, is easiest when you're using a TAMP in the first place. Continuity of advice can be a relationship with another advisor, buy-sell agreement with another advisor, ideally something that's actually in print. There's a growing number of platforms out there now that will actually sign an agreement to buy your practice and take over your clients if something happens to you unexpectedly as kind of a last-ditch backstop effort. Even our Pinnacle Advisor Solutions firm does a version of that for advisors with some assets that they want continued. And you're going to see more and more of that in the future. So, first of all, I kind of separate out the investment management end from the rest of the advice component, because just from the practical perspective, like, there are clients that will be justifiably concerned. Like, if I work with you and you're a solo and something happens to you, like, seriously, is anybody at the, like, steering the wheel to, like, not have this thing just fly right off the road because you're no longer in the picture? So things like third-party investment management solutions and TAMPs at least help with that end and ensure a continuity for the raw investment management. And in terms of the ongoing advice, it's, it can be having a partnership or an agreement with another advisor, or having a buy-sell agreement in place, even if it's with another advisory firm across town that could be your backstop. And if you have that arrangement, I would communicate to clients that you have that arrangement, and that's part of how you're protecting them and how you're making sure that there is continuity for them. The one caveat I'll put to this, because I actually see a lot of advisors do this with just kind of handshake agreements. Hey, if something happens to your clients, I'll take over for you. If something happens to my clients, you take over for me. Be very careful that if you're going to do that with someone, it's someone who actually has the capacity to serve your clients. One of the worst advisor stories I ever heard in this realm was someone who signed one of these agreements, not even just like the handshake, I'll take care of your client. Something happens to you, you take care of mine if something happens to me. But they actually, had a written contract, signed agreement for this transition with dollars attached. It was like, I'll buy your practice and you'll buy mine for some reasonably discounted value. But there were dollars on the line. And the problem that happened was now the person actually had a heart attack. Suddenly, my advisor friend was responsible for all of these clients that came in and needed help and needed service, who he had to service because there were financial dollars on the line to pay off to the family because of this buy-sell agreement, except there was a small problem. He already had 57 clients. He just inherited 67 from the other advisor, and he nearly blew up his own practice, being unable to even have the time to return the phone calls from his clients for the better part of a year, because he was servicing the other advisor's clients when he had no capacity to do so. And eventually he lost some of his, he lost some of the other person's, he hired someone on and slowly kind of dug out of this. But it was a horrible train wreck, both service to his clients, the new clients. Financially, it was not rewarding for him. It was damaging for him. And he kind of survived on the other end. But be very careful if you're going to do this, both as the one who would do this for someone else and whoever's going to do it for you, that you're working with someone who actually has the capacity to handle the clients, or at least has the financial ability to hire up an advisor to help if that situation should ever come to pass.
Yeah, I'll definitely say that's why I had 3 people on call to be able to split the clients because of capacity issues. And some folks are more prepared for growth than others. But yeah, I mean, just imagine just one day buying a firm the same size as yours. I can't even imagine the logistics of that. There's a reason big firms buy little firms.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have questions that you'd like for Michael and I to hit on these mailbag episodes once a month, join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. It's a really, really active Facebook group. And so you'll hear points of view from other folks, including Michael and myself, on topics that we may not necessarily be experts on. And so you'll get some really awesome feedback from other people as well. So definitely check that out, xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. So thanks everybody for being on today. We will see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Remember to join our VIP community to be able to ask questions for us to answer on the show, as well as interact with other members of the VIP community and get their perspective at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. This month's shows were brought to you by WealthBox CRM, a technology partner of the XY Planning Network. XYPN actually provides WealthBox CRM for free to all of its members. WealthBox CRM is simple, beautiful, and a collaborative CRM for the modern financial advisor. Start your free trial in 30 seconds at wealthbox.com. And also be sure to check out our interview with the co-founders of WealthBox CRM, John Rourke and Dan Franti. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.